The hospital hallway fell silent as a young nurse stood with tears in her eyes, clutching a cardboard box filled with her belongings. A furious supervisor accused her of stealing expensive medication, and security was already escorting her toward the exit. Just as the doors opened, a 54-year-old billionaire investor visiting the hospital stepped forward and calmly said, "No one leaves until I know the truth." Within hours, one shocking discovery would expose a cruel betrayal, change two lives forever, and remind everyone that kindness always reveals what pride tries to hide. She had worked at the hospital for almost 2 years, earning respect from patients who appreciated her gentle smile and endless patience. Every shift was exhausting, but she never complained because nursing wasn't simply a job, it was a promise she had made to her late mother. Although she struggled financially, she believed honesty was worth more than money. That morning, however, she sensed something strange. Colleagues whispered whenever she entered the room, and cold stares replaced the usual friendly greetings. The tension grew worse during the afternoon. A senior administrator suddenly called her into a meeting where several supervisors waited with grim expressions. They claimed expensive medication had disappeared from the storage room after her shift. Security footage showed her entering the pharmacy, making her the primary suspect. She explained she had collected medicine exactly as instructed for a patient, but nobody wanted to hear her explanation. Their decision appeared final before she even spoke. As she tried to defend herself, another nurse quietly avoided eye contact while staring at the floor. Something about that silence felt unusual, but the supervisors ignored every detail that didn't fit their conclusion. They emptied her locker, packed her belongings into a small box, and announced her immediate dismissal. Humiliated employees watched from the hallway. Some looked sympathetic, while others assumed guilt without asking a single question. At that exact moment, a distinguished man wearing a simple dark suit walked through the corridor. Few people recognized him immediately because he disliked attracting attention despite his enormous wealth. He had come to inspect the hospital after donating millions to expand its children's wing. Hearing the loud argument, he stopped. Years of leading businesses had taught him that truth often disappeared whenever powerful people rushed to judge someone weaker. He watched quietly as security escorted the young nurse toward the entrance. Her face showed heartbreak rather than anger. She wasn't begging for her job, she simply kept repeating that innocent patients deserved nurses who cared. Those words surprised him. Most people fighting accusations focused only on themselves. Instead, she worried about others. That single moment convinced him something about the situation didn't make sense. He politely asked the hospital director to explain everything. The director confidently described the missing medication, insisting evidence clearly proved theft. The billionaire listened without interrupting before asking one simple question. Did anyone actually see her steal anything? Silence filled the hallway. They had assumptions, incomplete security footage, and missing supplies, but no direct proof. His calm voice made everyone realize how quickly they had reached their conclusion. Instead of walking away, he requested that no final paperwork be completed until an independent review finished. As one of the hospital's largest donors and board advisors, his request carried tremendous influence. Some administrators looked annoyed, believing he was interfering unnecessarily. The young nurse quietly thanked him, though she expected nothing to change. After all, powerful institutions rarely admitted mistakes once accusations became public. Later that afternoon, while investigators reviewed electronic records, the billionaire visited the pediatric ward. Nurses spoke warmly about the dismissed employee. Parents praised her kindness, recalling how she often stayed after her shift to comfort frightened children without requesting overtime pay. One father explained she had secretly purchased medicine for families unable to afford prescriptions. None of those stories matched the image of someone willing to steal. The investigators soon noticed unusual activity inside the medication inventory system. Several records had been edited minutes before the missing drugs were reported. The edits came from a supervisor's office computer rather than the young nurse's workstation. That discovery raised serious questions. Someone with administrative access had altered digital records, making it appear that supplies disappeared during her shift. Suddenly, the evidence no longer pointed toward the obvious suspect. Curious, the billionaire asked for a complete audit instead of a limited investigation. He believed half-finished truths often created lifelong injustice. As technicians examined more records, they uncovered months of missing inventory hidden beneath falsified reports. The losses were far greater than anyone imagined. Whoever orchestrated the scheme had carefully blamed different employees over time, ensuring suspicion never focused on the real culprit. The investigation expanded through the evening, and the atmosphere inside the hospital changed completely. Administrators who had spoken with absolute confidence only hours earlier now looked uneasy. Every computer log, security recording, and inventory report was carefully examined. The billionaire remained surprisingly calm, reminding everyone that justice should never depend on status or assumptions. The young nurse sat quietly in an empty waiting room, wondering whether anyone would ever believe her innocence. As technicians restored deleted files, they discovered someone had intentionally erased several minutes of security footage from the pharmacy entrance. Fortunately, the hospital's backup server had automatically saved the original recordings. When the missing video appeared on the screen, everyone froze. It clearly showed the young nurse collecting medication for a patient exactly as instructed before leaving. Minutes later, another employee entered alone carrying an empty medical supply bag. The room became silent. The supervisor who had accused the nurse immediately tried to dismiss the footage as incomplete, but investigators insisted on watching every second. They noticed the same employee repeatedly looking over both shoulders before unlocking a restricted cabinet. Instead of recording the medication properly, several boxes disappeared into the bag. The evidence was no longer based on suspicion. It revealed a carefully planned theft. Further investigation uncovered something even more disturbing. The employee responsible had not acted alone. A senior administrator had helped manipulate inventory records for nearly a year, allowing expensive medication to be sold illegally outside the hospital. Whenever shortages appeared, they selected an innocent staff member to blame. Most employees were too frightened to question management, so the truth remained hidden behind fear and authority. The billionaire watched quietly as investigators confronted the administrator. Instead of admitting responsibility, the man desperately blamed everyone around him. Lies poured out faster than explanations. Eventually, the electronic records, restored videos, and financial documents left him with nowhere to hide. Security officers escorted both suspects from the hospital, this time wearing handcuffs instead of employee badges. Justice had finally begun replacing false accusations. Everyone expected the young nurse to celebrate, but she simply lowered her head and cried softly. She explained that losing the job had never been her greatest fear. The real pain came from realizing how quickly people she respected believed the worst about her. For years she had treated coworkers like family. In one afternoon, almost all of them had turned away without asking for the truth. The billionaire approached her gently and offered sincere words instead of sympathy. He apologized, not because he had accused her, but because people with influence often failed to protect honest workers before damage was done. She thanked him for believing in fairness when no one else did. Then she quietly admitted there was another reason she had fought so hard to keep her position. She reached into her worn handbag and carefully removed an old photograph. It showed a smiling elderly woman lying in a hospital bed beside a much younger version of herself. With trembling hands, she explained that her mother had spent years battling a serious illness in that very hospital. The nurses who cared for her mother inspired her to dedicate her own life to helping vulnerable patients, no matter the sacrifice. Her voice became even softer as she revealed another heartbreaking truth. After her mother passed away, she became the legal guardian of her 12-year-old brother. Every paycheck covered school fees, rent, groceries, and medical bills for his chronic condition. She worked double shifts, skipped vacations, and often ignored her own needs so her brother could continue dreaming about becoming an engineer one day. The billionaire felt a wave of emotion he rarely experienced. Hours earlier, he believed he was simply preventing an unfair dismissal. Now he understood he had unknowingly protected an entire family from losing everything. He looked out the hospital window, remembering his own difficult childhood before success changed his life. Wealth had given him comfort, But moments like this reminded him why compassion was far more valuable than money. The next morning, the billionaire returned to the hospital before sunrise. News of the investigation had already spread throughout the building. Staff members who had ignored the young nurse the previous day now struggled to meet her eyes. The hospital director publicly apologized for the injustice, offering her immediate reinstatement with full pay. She accepted the apology politely, but everyone could see that trust, once broken, could never be restored so easily. Instead of returning to work immediately, she asked for 1 hour of personal time. Carrying a small bouquet of white lilies, she visited the hospital chapel where her mother had once prayed before every treatment. Sitting quietly in the front pew, she thanked God for giving her strength when everything seemed lost. She didn't pray for wealth or success. She simply prayed that her heart would never become bitter toward those who had hurt her. The billionaire happened to pass by the chapel and quietly waited outside until she finished. He admired her ability to forgive after everything she had endured. When she stepped outside, he asked what gave her such remarkable strength. Smiling through tears, she replied, "Pain can either make us cruel or make us compassionate. My mother taught me to choose compassion every single time." Those simple words stayed with him long after the conversation ended. A few days later, he invited her to his office, not for publicity or celebration, but for a private conversation. He wanted to understand more about her dreams. She admitted she hoped to become a pediatric nurse practitioner one day, but tuition was far beyond her financial reach. Every dollar she earned went toward raising her younger brother and paying household expenses. Her own future had always come second. Without hesitation, the billionaire established a scholarship in her mother's memory, covering every expense of her education. He also created an emergency fund for hardworking hospital employees facing unexpected financial hardship, ensuring no honest worker would be left defenseless because of poverty. When she learned the scholarship carried her mother's name, tears filled her eyes. For the first time since losing her mother, she felt that her sacrifice had been truly seen. His generosity didn't stop there. He arranged a full medical evaluation for her younger brother at one of the country's best children's hospitals. Specialists confirmed that with proper treatment, the boy's condition could be managed successfully, giving him the chance to live a healthy and fulfilling life. When the young nurse heard the doctors deliver that hopeful news, she broke down in tears of relief, realizing that years of fear were finally coming to an end. Months passed, and she graduated at the top of her advanced nursing program. Patients adored her calm presence, children laughed when she entered their rooms, and fellow nurses admired her quiet leadership. She never spoke about the day she had nearly been fired unless someone asked. Instead, she encouraged new nurses to stand for honesty, reminding them that integrity sometimes feels lonely, but it is always worth protecting. The billionaire also experienced a profound change. His company had donated millions to hospitals over the years, but now he understood that buildings alone do not heal people, compassionate individuals do. He launched a nationwide initiative to support ethical healthcare workers, provide whistleblower protections, and fund scholarships for students from struggling families who dreamed of serving others through medicine. Several years later, during the opening ceremony of a new pediatric care center, she stood beside the billionaire as one of the keynote speakers. Looking across the crowd, she noticed dozens of young nursing students whose education had been made possible through the scholarship bearing her mother's name. In that moment, she realized that the worst day of her life had unexpectedly become the beginning of hope for countless others. As the audience rose for a standing ovation, the billionaire quietly smiled. He had stopped one woman from being unfairly fired, believing he was performing a simple act of justice. Instead, that single decision uncovered corruption, protected innocent lives, saved a young boy's future, and inspired lasting change. Sometimes the greatest investments are not measured in money, but in the courage to believe someone before the world condemns them. Moral: never judge a person before hearing the whole truth. Compassion, patience, and fairness can change lives in ways that wealth and power never can. One act of kindness toward an innocent person may become the beginning of hope for an entire generation.